All right, well, let's jump right in. Thank you so much, Ricardo and Anna, for setting this up. Dan and I are excited to present to all of you today. And honestly, Dan being, and I thought Ricardo was going to say that Dan was elected to some sort of Hall of Fame, which would have made sense. And when you're talking finance and the numbers, he's the man. He knows what we're talking about. As we talk about from my perspective on the research side of the house, it's really going to be helping you to understand really kind of what the story is behind the impacts of COVID and how that should help, along with Dan's information on the financial side, how to be thinking about your customers, how to be thinking moving forward, what types of things that you have coming up, and how to really prepare for the impacts of COVID. So as we go through these introductions, Dan's going to take a moment here to introduce himself, and then I'll jump in and go through the first part of the story. We're going to be talking the whole time about data points, the risk assessment outlook, and what kinds of information that gives you all and what you're doing and how you're doing, and hopefully some more tools in the toolkit to make some decisions moving forward. And then we'll provide some recommended next steps and final thoughts. And before doing that, Dan, let me go ahead and take it away, unmute yourself, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I formed AGVP Advisory. You could find it at agvpadvisory.com. And main function being looking at risk assessment, largely public utilities, consulting on risk management, credit position estimates and research, and lobbying advocacy. So that's my introduction.
Great, thanks so much. And from the GreatBlue side of the house, again, really the short version of what we do is help take data, drive insight and action, and really help folks make the next decision or understanding where they need to go. And while our organization was founded 41 years ago, my 22 years in the industry, conducting all those focus groups, as Ricardo mentioned, but really helping the utility industry through a variety of methodologies, as you'll see on the right side of the screen. Those are just a few of them, but we work with our customers to just really make sure that we're asking the right questions. We're insanely curious folks. We have to ask the right questions in order to get the right data. But again, at the end of the day, making sure that there's true insight and action tied to what we're doing. So as we jump right into our topic and we start to think about what the story is and what is the COVID-19, and we all know what COVID is. We all know in so many ways how it's impacted us working from home and all these different things. We're not going to focus so much on that, but why does it matter in a business and finance conference? How does that story help us make some financial decisions? And what do we know, right? And so what we're going to do is share a little bit about what we know and try to paint the picture and really try to tell the story of what's happening and how COVID has impacted some of the decision making that your customers are making and how that will impact some of the decisions that you as an organization have to make, not only with how you service those customers, but how you plan financially for your organization. So what did that story look like and what does it look like? And when we talk about key factors, and so I'm going to share some data points with you both locally that we've conducted in a statewide study that we conduct every quarter for Sacred Heart University about quality of life and the impact of different issues and topics, because I want to give you kind of a quick view on how that looks, because a lot of the data that we're seeing nationally is very consistent with what we see here locally in Connecticut. But unemployment and underemployment, so one member of a household being out of work or underemployed, it's having an impact on finances. We're learning a lot about how folks are prioritizing their financial decisions, what bills they're paying, when they're paying them. Are they paying them on time? Are they paying them late? Are they opting out of some of these payment programs that they were on historically? We're seeing that financial prioritization, and in a lot of ways, we're categorizing it as survival mode. If both my spouse and I are out of work and we've got kids and we've only got so much coming in on unemployment, we're going to make different decisions than if both of us are working. We've also seen with so many folks working from home, increased energy usage. So if you're a residential customer and you are used to having that average $100 bill, now all of a sudden that bill has gone up because you're home. So pre-COVID, we saw stability. You as utilities had the ability to shut folks off. And so those traditional shutoffs were happening. Unemployment rates were at a quote unquote normal rate. And there was some overall degree of balance in how we managed money, how we spent money, how we received money, and how we handled our collections. During COVID or since COVID, we don't know how long it will last. We don't know what kind of significant changes are happening to the electric industry, both with are folks going to not prioritize you and your payments as much because they know you're not going to shut them off? Will under or unemployment increase or start to stabilize? These are things we don't know yet. So we want to take what we've learned so far and apply that to what we're going to be doing moving forward. So understanding that impact a little bit, again, we talked about with utilities implementing no disconnects, no shutoffs, we're seeing that there is, while folks are still understanding and recognizing that if I don't pay my utility bill, there's going to be a catch-up effect. Thankfully, you all are still in the highest priority, along with rent or mortgage and food. You're still up there in that top 3-4 categories for financial payments and what we're going to do. But on that note, your customers, whether it's residential or businesses, are looking at reserves. They're looking at liquidity. They're starting to look at how they manage their own businesses, whether that business is their home or whether that business is their business. They're looking at it from a new lens that they haven't had to before. We're seeing in a lot of the data, and I'm going to show you some of these data points in a few minutes here, that financial assistance is very much needed, whether it is the ability to spread out in payment plans, again, how they're making their decisions, how they're prioritizing. All those different things are coming into play. So if you have financial assistance programs, now is the time, if you haven't already, to make sure folks are aware of those programs and how to get into them. So I wanted to break down kind of those key 5 or 6 areas in these studies that we're asking and what we're capturing. We're understanding quality of life. We're understanding financial impact. What kinds of bill payment adjustments, both in the past and in the future. There's shifts in energy consumption. We're seeing an uptick in the number of customers who are looking for energy conservation programs. It has also kind of sparked some topic about the gauge of interest in renewable energy moving forward. And then last but not least, we always capture demographic breakdowns. So here's a slide from that Sacred Heart University poll that we did, 1,000 completed surveys among Connecticut residents. You see 70% reported COVID-19 has impacted their daily life, a large impact, as you can see, 4 and 5, top 2 box, if you will. Big numbers of folks saying that COVID has had an impact. The number one response, or the number one most pressing need due to COVID-19, was money and financial assistance. Again, no surprise to probably anyone on this call, but I think one of the most telling numbers that we're seeing, 92% of residents are concerned with the financial impact on Connecticut's economy as it has been impacted by COVID. And so these numbers are pretty consistent as you look at other states across our country, and you look at some of these numbers nationally. Now, this poll here is taken from the Public Power Data Source, which is a joint effort between APPA, GreatBlue, and Hometown Connections. And this is basically APPA wanting to be the source for public power related data and us working together to provide that. So it is a subscription-based service, and this is data that is pulled right from our Q3 study that has just wrapped up. We're seeing 21.4% have had to make adjustments in their electric bill payment, whether folks are paying less of it or paying it late. So think of 1/4, 1/5 of your customers having an impact or having to make an adjustment to how they pay their bill. How does that impact your cash flow and your ability to buy power and things of that nature? 61% indicated this involved paying their electric bills late. Customers who have had to make adjustments in their electric bill, primarily under the age of 55 years household income below 60,000, we saw a larger number of folks in our south and west regions having that impact or needing to make an adjustment to their electric bill. And no real big surprise, right? As you get older, you start to have a little bit more in reserves on average, so you can weather this kind of storm. You might be a little more stable in your role within your organization, so unemployment has a little less impact. But you start to see paying the electric bills late, 61.3. We saw 28.1% utilize the payment plan assistance program, and 10.6% contacted the utility to reduce their bill. Again, participating in a program or a service, payment plans, adjustments, those sorts of things. So folks are being proactive about what they're doing with their information. I think probably one of the most telling slides to folks on this call will be this slide, and that is the bill payment adjustment. Of those previously enrolled in autopay, 44% have either already opted out or are considering opting out. When we talk about that control or taking back that control, if I've got to prioritize food or my electric bill, and I take a look at when that unemployment check or payment's going to hit my account, the math and the calendar might not align with one another. So I'm going to opt out of that auto pay program, and I'm going to give myself that control. And now I may pay that bill 4 or 5 days later when that check has come in or when that payment has come in. And again, you're seeing that in your younger, lower income households because there is a little bit more of that survival rate going on. And again, when we see the breakdown of folks having opted out, we saw 22.1% have already opted out of that auto pay. Another 22% are considering opting out, and 52.7% haven't considered opting out. And I'm sure if we ran the data against those who are gainfully employed, we'd largely see a correlation between those two audiences. In this slide, which literally the data is hot off the press, this data wrapped up literally this morning. So that 40.7% of folks who say no, I don't anticipate COVID having a negative impact on my ability to pay my bill. That number wrapped up at 43.2%. Of the 19.2% who said they were unsure, that went to 18.9%. And when we saw the number of folks anticipating a negative impact from COVID, that number wrapped up at 38%. So again, 38% anticipate COVID-19 having a negative impact on their ability to pay their electric bills. So that's 2 out of 10 of your customers fearful of that impact. This data, again, when you take a look at it, you may say, oh, geez, from April to May, household consumption has dropped. And the reality is it's just the opposite. When you take a look at from March to April, we saw that 86.3% of folks said that their household's energy consumption went up or did increase from the previous month. Now, when you take a look at May, when we're capturing that data, we haven't seen an increase since May, but there is still a strong increase of folks who are seeing increased data or increased energy usage and consumption at their home, which again makes sense. So now you multiply folks who are seeing increases in their consumption at home by those folks who have also experiencing some financial impact, we only see that potential impact growing worse. Now you get into the 55 plus household, age income of 60,000 plus and more in your west and Midwest region. So folks that can work at home now are doing so, and that's where some of that shift and some of that impact is coming from. Renewable interest levels. This was one of those areas, 55.6% interested in their utility purchasing initial renewable energy. However, normally we see a much smaller number of folks saying they're not willing to pay anything additional. When it comes to renewable energy, folks see the benefit, they see the value, they're even starting to understand at a higher level the impact that it's having on carbon emissions and those sorts of things. So they're seeing the value and they're bought into the value. But why we chose this slide here for this particular conference is more and more folks are saying, I'm not willing to pay anything additional at that time or at this time. So they still want you to purchase it, but they don't want to pay extra for it right now. And that's logical because they are experiencing some financial impact. So just one or two more slides for me, and then I'll turn it over to Dan to walk you through his, and then we'll catch up at the end of the presentation to walk through our recommendations. So what are some things to keep an eye on moving forward? Obviously, we want to educate our customers, both on the residential and the business side, about what you all are doing. Your reliability and the relationship that you as a public power organization have with your customers is a good one. They trust you, they rely on you, and they're looking to you for what to do next. So continue to educate your folks on what's happening. Continue to help them understand why fuel diversity is important and how it impacts cash and those sorts of things. Understanding and keeping those cash reserves on hand as an organization, knowing full well that you might run into some of your customers falling on hard times financially moving forward. Taking a look, obviously, what if they don't pay? What if we see that decrease in auto pay versus just them thinking about it? Outage restoration is still very important. While we're talking about dollars and cents, largely in COVID from an impact perspective, we also want to let them know one of the studies that we did here in Connecticut talking about outage restoration was less about the power being out for the first time, and it was more about their internet being out as folks were working from home and power went out. People were like, I don't care so much about the power, but now I can't work. So reminding folks from an educational standpoint, outage restoration efforts and what you're going to do to get them back on, modern technology and customer adaptation levels, and expectations versus longevity. So again, there's going to be short-term expectations that your customers have, and there's going to be long-term expectations. So we want to be pretty clear with them both about how you're thinking short-term as well as how you're thinking long-term as well. So obviously all of this ties into what the future and how we're planning ahead. Again, focusing on those customer needs and demands, be thinking about the humanistic approach of how you talk to customers. Since 9/11 literally was just Friday, I'm always reminded of a study that we were doing for New York Power Authority the week of 9/11 when the World Trade Centers were hit, and we were making calls to customers. And at that point, the New York Power Authority leadership and ourselves decided we were going to hold off, and when New York got back to work is when we would get back to work. So about 10 days later, we were told to get back to work because New York was getting back to work. And at that point, it was less about completing surveys and more about talking to people from a humanistic standpoint level. And our average call time went from 11 minutes to well over 2 hours. And that was because the surveys didn't take much longer. It was just because we had conversations with folks and told them that we cared. And New York Power Authority got a lot of compliments for that kind of conversation and the care that they took. So as you think about the impact that your customers are having, the sorts of stress and strain that they're having personally and individually, and being able to be a resource and a partner with them in this effort will go a long way. So focusing on those needs and communicating what resources you have to help them will allow them to develop action plans of how they're implementing action items internally, but also allowing you all to be proactive and in many ways predictive, because this is a moving target. It will continue to be a moving target for many months to come. So as long as we're all understanding that and we're doing our best, hopefully we'll all get through this together. That being said, if there's any questions, we'd be welcome and take them at this time. And just again, want to thank Dan for preparing this presentation with our team. He's a pleasure to work with, and we enjoyed learning from you, Dan. Thanks so much. Take a look in the chat and see if there's anything that shows up there. Okay. Any other questions from folks in the audience? Hearing none, Dan, then that means we did our job today.
Well, there's one there.
Oh, is there one? Let's see here. Did I read the data correctly from the GreatBlue survey that 13% of customers reported being late in payments? Let me double check that. So it'd be the 61% of the 21% who had to make adjustments. So we had 21.4% of our sample which is 643. I'll get the math here for you in just a second. 60% of the 20%, correct. It's a big number for sure. And I think that's one of those numbers that will grow as well, the longer that COVID continues to have an impact. And that's one of those decisions that they're making. That's one of those prioritizations. If it comes down to, you know, food or something of that, or paying a mortgage or paying a rent, there can be a domino effect. And that's one of the things that we're trying to capture at GreatBlue on a regular basis, both in our PPDS data, but as well as every study that we're doing right now for every customer, whether it's a utility, whether it's healthcare. This is something we're trying to keep an eye on, because that's one of the big things for us that we feel could be that potential gotcha moment. And John, just, and this is for everyone, both Dan's contact information as well as mine is available. So feel free to reach out to either one of us with any questions that you might have. If you think of something afterwards, I know I do. We certainly welcome any questions that you have, and we're happy to share what we have. New question coming in: what late percentages between residential and business customers? Allison, if you want to shoot me an email, I'll be happy to get that for you. I don't have that in front of me, but if you want to just shoot me an email, I can easily get that for you. But generally speaking, we're seeing lots of consistencies between the residential and the commercial data in terms of who's paying late, who's having troubles. On the business side of the equation, what we are seeing a difference is between small, medium, and large businesses. Obviously, a lot of the smaller businesses, particularly in those that were being forced to be shut down, much greater impact there. And a lot of that data kind of coincides with what you'd think logically. If restaurants and places like that can't be open, yet they're still having to pay their utility bills, even though it's smaller, they don't have the income to do it, that's having a bigger impact. And you'll start to also see now nationally where a lot of the PPP funds that help get folks through that initial stretch are starting to dwindle and run down. And if they haven't been able to get their business back open, then you'll see some impact there as well. Well, folks, on behalf of the staff of GreatBlue Research, thank you so much for your time. As I mentioned, again, we're open and available to answer any questions that you have. Dan, again, thanks again. It was a pleasure working with you, and appreciate your time.